So now, with those few words of housekeeping, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker. It's my distinct pleasure and honor to get to introduce to you Dr. Alison Kadlec, the senior partner at SOVA. Alison is passionate about leveling the playing field for today's students. Over the last 20 years, she has worked deeply with systems and institutions in more than half of the states in the United States to help leaders at every level strengthen the will and skill required for genuinely student-focused reform of policy and practice at scale. Alison also leads work with state policymakers and regional coalitions to improve the quality of policy design and implementation planning. From coordinating statewide work to providing one-to-one executive coaching, Alison works at multiple levels to help people strengthen their resolve and capacity to lead real student-focused change. Before co-founding SOVA, Alison was a senior vice president at Public Agenda, where she led higher education and workforce projects focused on elevating student voice, improving faculty engagement in guided pathways, and helping institutions collaborate across boundaries on student-focused initiatives. Alison began her career as a visiting professor in a variety of four-year university settings in Minnesota and New York, and she credits most of her skills to the years she spent bartending to fund her education and supplement her adjunct salary. That's cool. Alison is the author of a book about enduring relevance of John Dewey and has published in a variety of settings inside and outside higher education on topics ranging from public deliberation to public purposes of play. She holds a PhD in political science from the University of Minnesota and Bachelor of Arts from Michigan State University in political theory, constitutional democracy, and English literature. So at this time, I'm going to welcome Alison to the stage, and I'm going to step down. When she concludes, I'll have a few messages to send us out for the afternoon. So, Alison?
All right. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you. I recognize actually a lot of folks in the room today from a listening session that we did with transfer specialists back in, when was that? September, October, September. It is great to say, I see a lot of you. I see you. And it's great to see you back here because the culminating strategy, the four-year state really began with that input and with all of the work that you had done leading up to, as a state, leading up to those early listening sessions. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. And for those of you who I haven't met yet, thank you for being here and for everything that you're doing for your students and the Commonwealth. It is a sincere pleasure to be with you. All right, so I have a clicker. We're going to see if it works. We're going to use Mentimeter, and we're going to see if that works. Wait, does it go this way or that way? So the clicker, it seems simple. There are two arrows. And I have pressed them both. Wait, is it on? I have turned it on. Help! That's all I need to do is just yell help. That's fantastic. All right. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I know that this is sort of the time of day when everybody threatens to slide into a slump, right? The 3 o'clock slump. So there is coffee. Feel free to help yourselves. If sitting endlessly crushes your spirit or your spine at any moment in time, are you all planning to be here tomorrow as well? Excellent. So I just want to tell you that I have 20 Mr. Potato Heads that are coming here tomorrow. And you're all going to, yes, exactly, all of those looks were exactly the looks that airport security gave me when they said, "Ma'am, what's in your bag?" And I said, "Those are 20 Mr. Potato Heads." And they said, "Whatever your thing is your thing. We're not here to question." So today is the beginning of a conversation we're going to really dig in tomorrow, and it's going to be a lot of working together and really surfacing ideas and insights that can inform the ongoing work around implementing, refining, and always improving the transfer strategy work at your state. is doing. All right, so what I want to do is the session overview here is, why now? Why is this work happening now for your state? I'll very quickly, you just got through some really interesting presentations, including some really powerful data about the work that has been accomplished in your state for your students. And so I'm not going to drown you in data. We're going to dive right into how the transfer strategy was developed. I want to take a little bit of a pit stop at what are the traits of a good strategy? What is a strategy supposed to do for a state, right? And then dig in. The strategic objectives and priorities are the heart of the strategy. I think you are able to see the full strategy online at the Resource Center. So you've got it there at your fingertips. I have put on the very back S-curvy table back there a couple of notepads, and I've thrown some down on tables. If you have thoughts throughout today or tomorrow that you want to inform the work moving forward of implementing, designing, planning for, supporting ongoing implementation of transfer priorities for your state, please share those. Now, there are going to be plenty of opportunities to speak up, use Mentimeter. We're going to use all of the different ways. But if you just have a thought that you want us to keep in mind and you don't want to stand here and say it to the world, or you think it's not, doesn't rise to, share it all. More is more, and we want to hear from you about all the thoughts you have related to your transfer work as a state, as really distinct institutions within your state and for your students. And then we're going to do some sort of structured implementation feedback using Mentimeter. So we are going to now experiment with Mentimeter. This is the part that is like an anxiety dream for me, because I'm not sure exactly. How many of you have used Mentimeter? We're going to be fine. I call that a critical mass, the 11 of you who raised your hand. Okay. All right, so here's what's going to happen. So you go to mentimeter.com. These are some warm-up questions, very low stakes. And you use the code 37746992. Presumably, magically, this will result in an opportunity for you to share what your... Yes, it's working. All right, popcorn. What else? What else do we have here? Snickers, yes. Bourbon, yes. I like it. Cheez-Its. Ooh, we've got a couple of Cheez-Its here. I'm with you on grapes. Nice. Awesome. Okay, so is it working for everybody? More or less. All right, excellent. Okay, so these are small stakes questions, of course, but as we get going into the conversation, through the, as we get into things, would love for you to use Mentimeter to share perspectives. So we'll have a couple of questions toward the end of the session on that. We'll spend some time there. All right. Okay, so what's your favorite TV show right now? If you don't watch television, bravo. Do you have favorite music that you're listening to right now? What are you enjoying? Ooh. Okay, I will admit that I don't get to watch nearly the amount of television that I would like to, because I'm married to somebody who doesn't watch television. So I wanted this question so that I could find things that I can watch on my own on planes. All right, let's see here. What do we got? Oh, this is excellent. I'm taking some notes. Wow, Yellowstone is very popular. All right. Oh, I heard Shrinking is great. Okay. The Last of Us, 1923. Nice. Shout out to the Seinfeld in here. Like, way to take it back. And Friends, nice. Oh, I love it. Somebody who doesn't watch television but listens to the Chili Peppers. Bravo, my hat's off to you here. All right. Okay, so that's Mentimeter. And that is how we use it. And I'm going to take a couple of notes on TV shows I should watch, which clearly is Yellowstone. Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay, So why a statewide transfer strategy? So you know this. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time here. Too few transfer aspiring students reach their goal, and that's a full stop. We also know that increasingly learners are mobile, right? Today's learners acquire learning and knowledge in lots of different settings on their way to a credential. It is not just about vertical transfer, but 2-year to 4-year transfer remains the bulk of transfer in any given state and setting. So we know that too few baccalaureate aspiring students achieve their goals. And so this is part of the context. We also know that transfer success is an issue related to fairness in higher education. It is a matter of equity as fairness, leveling the playing field for today's students, students from low-income backgrounds, students of color, returning adults, what most people call now new traditional students, right, make up a growing share of undergraduates in this country, and their paths are not as linear as what was once the traditional student's path, right? And so creating a way for every learner in your state, for your Commonwealth to develop all of the talent that you will need as a state and for our country requires creating the conditions for many, many, many more of your students to achieve their goals. And that includes centering transfer and transfer student success. All right, we also know that it is, there's a moral imperative here, but there's a business imperative for institutions, and there is an economic upward mobility imperative for learners, right? You heard a lot earlier today about the relationship between education and upward mobility. SOVA, as an organization, it means owl in Czech and Slovak. It's a nod to my dad, who was a refugee of World War II from Czechoslovakia, and to Paul Markham's rural roots. He's fifth-generation Kentucky dairy farmer and the first in his family to go to college. And our organization exists for the purpose of helping institutions, states, and systems make good on this country's social contract, that education is a path to a better future, regardless of accidents of birth or fortune. And we know that there is no safer bet for upward mobility than education, right? And so there is a moral imperative for this work that is tied to the economic imperative for the learners of Kentucky. So, all right, so the transfer strategy, when the Student Success Collaborative folks began talking about a comprehensive statewide transfer strategy, part of the rationale for that was there is tremendous strength to build on. And here are just a few examples of the incredible strengths that your state brings. Now, I do work in lots of states around the country, and every state thinks they're special in a variety of ways. I will tell you that Kentucky, you have done some tremendous work. You are doing tremendous work on behalf of your students. In many ways, you are field leaders, and in many ways, you are special. And so you have established a number of strengths that many other states and systems and entities in the ecosystem of higher education struggle to achieve, right? You have a tremendously strong data infrastructure. You've got a statewide gen ed core, right? You've got principles for credit for prior learning. You've got a profound statewide deep commitment to students that shows up in a lot of different ways, right? And so there is an incredible history of collaboration across your institutions. There's also a tremendous history of innovation. So as the collaborative folks, the Student Success Collaborative team, we're saying, okay, a transfer strategy, given all of the work that we have done as a state so far, given all of the things that we've achieved, and given all that is ahead of us in this work, we really need a strategy to help us sort of put our feet on the same ground together and to think together about what is the most important work that we can be doing as a state for the next several years. And so when we think about, let's see here, the place that this fits in CPE's strategic agenda, right? It's one of the things that I so appreciate about CPE and the Student Success Collaborative is this intentional knitting, right? Transfer isn't a bolt-on, it's not an add-on, it's not a thing over there. It is central to your student success. It is central to your ability to achieve your strategic priorities as a state, right? And so transfer sits squarely in success, it also shows up in all of these different buckets, right? So we circled the middle here because that's really where we, where we have an explicit mention of maximizing transfer credit. But that affordability, that transitions, that talent, that value, that all of these things implicate transfer as well, right? So you've got this very strong foundation. All right, so one of the things that's important to SOVA as an organization, and it's one of the reasons that we so value and are grateful for the partnership with CPE and the Student Success Collaborative, is a shared commitment to listening first. Not coming in and telling you, here's what everybody else is doing and here's what you need to do, but really listening, right? And so very early on, I want to shout out Harmony. Thank you for sharing lots and lots of documents. And yeah, well, let's shout her out then properly. There you go. So lots of documents, lots of work with advisors, KCTCS, a lot of time spent in thinking about barriers and opportunities around transfer student success. We know a lot of work has gone on at all of the four-year institutions in this state around transfer. So the first thing we did was start by listening, right? So got a lot of documents to review the work that you've been doing as a state, and then began last September with that listening session that I mentioned at the beginning here. Again, for those of you, could you raise your hand if you were in that room in September? All right. Well, so you all deserve a round of applause from your colleagues because you spent a whole day digging deep. Right? And it was such a fun day, as I recall, too. I mean, time spent in windowless rooms isn't always described as extraordinarily fun, but I remember that day as being very, very fun, in addition to being enormously productive. And we wanted to begin by listening to frontline transfer specialists because those, I said, somebody mentioned that I was a Dewey person at the outset. Dewey said that nobody knows how the shoe pinches like the person wearing it, right? So the people that are closest to students are the people that we need to hear from first. And so we began listening to frontline transfer specialists. So thank you again for the time that you spent there and also for the review time that you spent later on documents. And then we took all of that input, all of the documentation that we had had from previous workshops, efforts, collaborations among advisors and others, to really take stock of efforts to date. Again, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's not about coming to you and saying, here's what another state is doing, you need to do this. It's about building on the tremendous work that you have already done as a state, that you're doing every day for your students, right? And then we had some provost CAO engagement, had a session where we spent some time listening, shared back some of those initial themes from the transfer specialist session, some of that distilling input, and said, what do you all think? Are there any CAOs in the room? You all have the hardest job in the world. You're like, I was just telling you that. It is an incredibly difficult job. And so making sure that early academic leadership of institutions were at the table providing input was essential to this. And then there was more refining and finalizing and then refinalizing, and then reverse transfer came up again, and all kinds of things showed up. And so there was a long process of a lot of back and forth and distilling of information to get us to a strategy. And I'll say that, one of the things that was my commitment at the outset was this document cannot be 50 pages long when it's done. It can't be something that is produced, that's beautiful, that sits on a shelf. It has to be something that's used. And it has to be something that's useful, so it can't be longer than 6 pages because people don't read anymore. And we need to have things concise for us. There's too much coming at us. So a lot of input from your various associations and groups, and another round with the specialists, and then finalize the draft. So that brings us to today. This is the official release of the strategy. What you will observe from the document, if you dig into it, let's see here, is that it is brief, and that it is designed to be useful to you. So this was a set, and for those of you who were at that very first session in September, I think I had a version of this for you then, because I wanted us to ground in what is it that a strategy should be and do, right? So a strategy needs to be strong, and a strong strategy is going to prioritize students. It's got to be really clear about the fact that transfer student success is not for just the people who have the word transfer in their title. It is everybody's work, because it is a growing share of your learners, right, who attend multiple institutions on their way to a credential. A strategy that's actually effective in driving or supporting or providing a foundation for accelerated progress on shared challenges has to be, it has to align longer term goals, so let's say 10-year goals, with shorter term incremental change, right? The kind of change that you can see and pursue and measure with leading indicators, right? And then a useful strategy is actually going to be practical. It's going to be real things, right? Real barriers, real opportunities, real work for you to do. And then finally, I think there was another version of this, that an endorsable strategy. I think, okay, so the framing here is it's going to strengthen CPE and the collaborative's ability to advocate for resources and support to institutions, whether that's state resources or philanthropic resources. Another version of this would be an endorsable strategy is one that does not unintentionally proliferate unfunded mandates for institutions, right? It is about actually creating the conditions for your institutions to raise up the good work that you're doing, get it supported, and have it recognized and honored in the form of additional resources and attention on the national stage and among colleagues in the sort of P20 pipeline here in Kentucky. So that's the sort of background here on this. Wanted to keep it simple. Again, if you've got on the back of your lanyards the QR code that will take you to the resource section. If you want to pull up the strategy, you can do that and take a look at it. Again, welcome your feedback here, welcome your feedback after, welcome your feedback all day tomorrow. This is an important opportunity. This isn't just to share with you where this strategy came from and what's in it, but also to create the conditions for you to think for yourselves about, okay, what does it mean to implement some of these things? There is some relatively vague language here and there in the strategy, and that was intentional. It's designed to create the conditions for people to find themselves in it, to lock on to important work, and to start driving toward it. There's also some very specific language because there was a lot of work already underway, right? So you've got the website, and tomorrow I think at lunch we're going to get a demonstration of the website, so you're going to get some time to look at the transfer website. That's work that is underway right now. It still means that high quality implementation of the transfer website isn't a one-off. It's not something that you flip a switch, it's live and we're good, right? It's going to take ongoing refinement and insight about what it means for the website to do what it's supposed to do, what you want it to do for your students, right? Because there's a student-facing element, but also for faculty, staff, and administrators, right? There's also a institution-facing element of it. So you've got these pieces, right? There are three large pieces of your strategy, and I'm going to actually read you the formulations of these. So student-centered, we will center students' needs above all else in the pursuit of scalable improvements in transfer, credit mobility, and recognition of learning across Kentucky. So that's the anchor statement for student-centered. And then under that, there are a host of pieces, right? There's the website, there's the student journey maps, and this is an opportunity, as you think about student journey mapping, it's something that a lot of institutions, states, and systems do to help institutions get a look at what the processes look like from a student's perspective, right? You are all professionals working in your institutions and their systems and policies and practices. Understandably, we're sort of designed in ways that support the professionals using them, and so to really get a clear look at how those processes, policies, and systems are experienced by your students is a tremendous opportunity for improvements, right? And then data and research, really understanding, right, what is happening to your students, right? What actually is happening along the way, not just the lagging indicators of credential completion, but what is actually happening along the journey, right, for students, and what does your data and research tell you? One of the things that I've been so impressed with is the commitment on the part of the Student Success Collaborative to student voice work, because it is quantitative data is essential, it is central, and that research is critical. It is also so important to consistently have the voices of your learners in the mix. And having high quality student voice work is part of the data and research of really understanding where the opportunities are. And then collaborative, right? So collaboration is the second sort of pillar. It's a strategic objective that guides all of the work, right? And the language here is, we will prioritize efforts related to strengthening institutional collaboration in service to better and more equitable outcomes for students who attend multiple institutions and who acquire learning in a variety of settings on their way to a credential. How many of you are involved in the improvement community work, the NICs? Is there anybody here who's engaged in that? All right, excellent. So I think we're also going to have a panel tomorrow with some improvement community participants here. That work of taking large, complicated, sometimes seemingly overwhelming challenges and breaking them down into bite-sized pieces and small tests of change to see what you can do to improve student experience is powerful work. It really is an antidote to solutionitis, and it's something that your state has embraced beautifully. And so you're going to have you're going to double down on that. That was something that was clear from the outset. Those of you who have been involved in the improvement communities, as well as the folks at the Student Success Collaborative and CPE that have been supporting those improvement communities, are really excited about the promise that they hold. And so as we think about providing feedback on implementation for this strategy, which is where I want to spend sort of lion's share of our time here today, feel free to think about the kinds of topics, right? What are the kinds of topics that lend themselves to improvement communities? Where's the work? Where have you been involved in other improvement community work or learning community work that could be leveraged here to accelerate progress, positive progress for your students? And then partnership work. So partnerships, you all have partnerships, 2- and 4-year partnerships, partnerships within KCTCS. You know, you have a history of working on and building the infrastructure for reverse transfer, which is, you know, promising for your state. There are all kinds of expressions of partnership work. And so, you know, one of the things that we want to dig in with you here today and again tomorrow is to think about, what does it mean? What does it actually look like to improve partnership work in a way that really results in the kind of progress that you want to see for your students? And then seamless. So student-centered, collaborative, and seamless. The language around seamless is, we will focus on removing obstacles to seamless transfer and credit mobility for Kentuckians, and our efforts will be aimed at maximizing the applicability of credits towards students' programs of study. So again, big shout out to, at every stage of the feedback, there was either a chorus of voices or a host of individual voices that said, it is not enough to talk about transfer of credit. It has to be about applicability of credits in transfer, right? And we know the host of challenges that come with maximizing applicability of credit and transfer. And we know that removing barriers to seamless transfer isn't just about student experience. It is about long-standing practices, business models, assumptions, incentive structures that shape how institutions work with each other or don't work with each other, right? And that is the environment in which you are all pursuing greater seamlessness. So we know that you are working in structures and systems and processes that you have been improving over time, but we also know that those systems, structures, and processes weren't necessarily designed to meet the needs of today's students, right? And so that is the work of implementing this transfer strategy, is figuring out where are the most important opportunities for accelerating progress on seamless portability of credits and learning. prior learning, again, I think this is one of the things that makes you special as a state. You have a really strong history of awarding credit for prior learning, of honoring military service, workplace learning, learning acquired in high school. And that work must continue and be built on, right? So there is ongoing work. These are not new ideas that are being, dropped onto Kentucky. This is the work that you have been doing. And the strategy is an opportunity to sort of wrap your arms around the big picture and say, okay, this is what we're about. We are about students, we're about collaboration, and we're about the goal of seamlessness. And here's what we're doing, and here's what we have yet to do, and here's the path forward, right? And so for all of these pieces, and including the transfer pathways work, right? So statewide transfer pathways in high impact, high priority areas, that is immensely difficult work. It is work that you are already undertaking, right? And so for those of you who have been involved in that work to date, thank you for laying the groundwork for more of that work for your state, right? This is what your students need, and this is what you are creating the conditions for them to have. So these are the strategic objectives and priorities. Let me just see here if there's anything that I want to, before not talking at you endlessly, but turning it to conversation here. I just want to make sure that there's nothing. Okay. So I do invite you all to take some time to just dig into, read the strategy. Again, it was 6 pages long. It's not very long. You can even skim it and capture. I think there's some bolding. Yes, go for it. Oh, it's not linked yet? It will be. I didn't know that, but it will be. Okay. There's like a right now scrambling going, like, let's see if we can get it. All right. So once it is linked, it would be great if you could take a little bit of time. Again, we're going to have multiple venues. It's one of the things that Dr. Collins has stressed again and again in the process is, let's make sure that we're listening, right? We started this process by listening. We're so excited about the strategy that has been produced as a result of that listening. But now it's about listening, because this cannot, again, be a strategy that gets produced and then sits on a shelf. It has to be something that you can refer to. It has to be something that you can use to build better, stronger understanding among colleagues, and that works for you, right? That allows you to do things. Okay, so before we get into, I wanted to share with you some of the feedback that we got along the way when we were developing the strategy and preparing the document. And then I want to get into feedback from today, for today. So student-facing communication, this came up. So those of you who provided feedback, thank you. I hope you see yourself in some of this information. So student-facing communication, and this is some of what I think the website is designed to help accomplish, but it is certainly larger than that. Student-facing communication about the value of higher education, about the value of transfer, about the doability of a bachelor's degree, right, for students who begin at community colleges. The kind of communication that we saw it, in several of the conversations before, that helps students feel like they belong, like they are able to do and achieve their goals, right? That it's possible, right? That kind of strategic communication with students is really important. And so along the way, we got feedback around, make sure that as you're thinking about how to communicate with faculty, or you're making sure the website works well, that we're really thinking about what it means to effectively communicate with today's students, right? Curricular complexity and hidden prerequisites come up all the time. It is enormous work, huge work to analyze curriculum, to understand curricular complexity, to unpack it, and to uncover. I use the word hidden, not to suggest that there are intentionally hidden prerequisites, but there is a lot in the structure of curriculum and in the structure of prerequisites that simply isn't visible to students. It's not visible to students, and in fact, it's not really visible in many ways to anybody until you're kind of caught up in it, right? Until it's costing you time or money as a student, or until you've got a student at your office in tears because they have wasted time and money thinking they were taking the right thing, but they didn't take the right thing, or they didn't take it in the right order, or the thing they need isn't offered until next year, right? All of those things. So along the way, and there are places, so every time that we received feedback on the document, either I would go in and flag places where we could strengthen language to signal, or I would go through and look for where I see it already in the strategy, either implied or explicitly. And there are some places in the strategy around analysis and research and better understanding. I think hidden prerequisites might be mentioned specifically. This is enormously difficult work, right? But it is work that has to be done to really make visible your curriculum, to make visible prerequisites, to make visible and to really understand curricular complexity. So thank you to the many of you who gave that feedback. We could not agree more with that. Affordability for transfer students comes up again and again, right? These things also, you see that how they're related, right? There are intersections between several of these pieces of insight, but affordability for transfer students. So transfer scholarships, upper division transfer scholarships, 4-year financial planning for students, really thinking about what it looks like and means for students to be able to afford a bachelor's degree and begin at a, sort of attend multiple institutions on their way to a credential, or begin at a 2-year and complete at a 4-year. So much work to be done on supporting advisors. How many of you here are or have been advisors in any? Thank you for everything that you are doing. You have tremendously difficult jobs, and those jobs need real, authentic support, right? And that includes understanding your experience as advisors in the work and creating the conditions for you to be empowered in service of better outcomes for your students. Building on reverse transfer efforts came up several times. And it came up in the context not just of awarding associate's degrees retroactively, or in the context of the pursuit of 2+2s more efficiently, or honoring student learning, but there are lots of ways in which reverse transfer was raised, 3+1 programs and pathways, and lots of other kinds of partnership type work that reverse transfer is connected to. So it came up again and again, and that is why it is included in the strategy. There are questions, funding formula implications. Now, the Student Success Collaborative work and the work of the strategy is designed to be about what you can do in practice, right? What are the practical activities, work that can be done on the ground to achieve student-centered, collaborative, seamless transfer pathways. But we also know that you do that work in a funding environment that may or may not be conducive to supporting transfer students effectively. And so better understanding the implications of funding formula for your transfer students and making some of that visible in this work is part of a solid transfer strategy. And then attention implementation. There were so many pieces of feedback and it was really encouraging to see, actually, lots of feedback where people had some version of the devil is going to be in the details. And it's going to be about how we get it done, right? How we actually do the work in practice. So that is why we wanted to feature, give you a quick overview of the transfer strategy here, and then create the conditions for you here today and tomorrow to weigh in on what does it mean to attend effectively to implementation in these priorities, right? What are the most important considerations? What are the things that get overlooked but can't be overlooked? Or what are the things that we just really need to put front and center to make the strategy something practical and useful for your state? Okay, so, all right, Mentimeter. Now, it's a silly question, but I'm going to ask it. Do you all still just have it there available to you because you've been in there? Excellent, great. Okay, so what's most important to you? Take a minute to look at these, and if you have questions about what any of them mean, let's raise that so that we can all be talking about the same things. So the first one here, you can rank them. You can say there are a certain set of them. I'm not exactly sure how it is structured on Mentimeter, but you can choose a few that are most important. You can rank them, I think, or just shout, sort of shout them out, Mentimeter, and say, number whichever is most important to me. So the first is implementing, refining, and supporting use of the transfer website, right? This is work that's already underway, but it is work that is going to be, like everything else, it is made or broken in the quality of implementation, right? So is the refinement and supporting skilled and committed use of the transfer website most important to you, right? Again, it doesn't need to be the number one most important thing, but some important things, right? And then showing institutions what transfer looks like from a student perspective, so that's student journey mapping, right? Is that critical? Is that one of the most important things to you? Building on improvement communities to accelerate partnership work. So those really cool NASH networked improvement communities that some of you have been involved with great effect, to great effect. Is that a tremendous opportunity? Would you rank that high? Providing professional learning and development for advisors. And this is also, so, the shorthand here is professional learning and development, but there's also a broader sense of just overall support, recognition of the tremendous work that is being done by advisors and the need to support advisors effectively, right? Addressing hidden prerequisites and analyzing curricular complexity. Is that the most important work to be done, or among the most important pieces of work to be done to implement your transfer strategy over time and achieve its goals? Building statewide transfer pathways, right? There's some really important work, again, already underway, and there's more coming. Are statewide transfer pathways where it's at? Is that the most important thing? Analyzing credit evaluation practices. So there are several references in the strategy to analysis, to data, to better understanding the ecosystem. One of the things that we see nationally in our work on transfer is that credit evaluation practices are not particularly well understood. They're one of the things that are sort of hidden, not intentionally, but they're not exactly transparent to students and to others. So is it important to really understand how credit evaluation practices are happening, right? To improve credit evaluation. And then analyzing the impact of policies. So there are things that are outside of your hands. There's the policy environment in which you live, right? And some of those things have a huge impact on what you can and can't do. So how important is it to really understand the impact of policies on transfer students? So here are a few examples, right, of the kinds of things that could be important to you. If something else not on this list is particularly important to you, want to hear that as well. So my question is this: does this take us to a Mentimeter? Is this how that? Yes. Ooh. Okay. All right. If anybody needs me to go back to the list, do you need me to go back to the list? Okay, cool. All right. So what are the most important considerations when it comes to implementation of transfer improvements? Okay, I'll go back. Here I go. I'm going back. I can do it. Oh, there we go. All right. And then I'll go forward. Oh, yeah. If you want to take a picture of this. And because it's so quiet, but there are a lot of humans in this room, feel free to say stuff too, if you want to say stuff. Yes. Oh, okay. Are you talking about, and you're in a private institution? Right. Yep. Yes, absolutely. I would say, I mean, and anybody here, feel free to disagree with this. Oh, yes. So the statement was for those at private institutions, and I see the private institutions table in the middle, so if there's more to add here, feel free to dive in. But the statement was for private institutions, it's hard. One of the challenges that they face is really helping sort of evaluating credits and communicating with students about what will apply and taking what students have and seeing how it fits and how it can apply. That there's a lot of complexity in credit evaluation work, right? And that's difficult. So one of the things I would say is that is universally true. I mean, I would say for the rest, like for how many of you at public institutions would you say that is also the challenge? Yeah, so that is a common challenge. I will say for those of you at private institutions, and we see this in many other places, private institutions are sometimes viewed as friendly, transfer friendly, because of the mechanisms by which credit evaluation happens and because of the commitment to maximizing applicability of credits in transfer, right? Sort of the processes that are designed. I think for a lot of 4 years, transfer students are considered lifeblood, right? Like this is, like we need transfer students to survive. I think for private institutions, smaller institutions, that's particularly the case. And so some of that internal work to err on the side of maximizing applicability of credits and transfer, it is a universal challenge. Now, I would say that for smaller private institutions or smaller four-year institutions or small community colleges accepting students that come in with multiple transcripts or credits from other institutions, when you are strapped for resources or you're at a smaller institution where everybody is doing 4 jobs, right? That creates other kinds of challenges. On the other hand, creates a lot of opportunities because there's a lot fewer places where communication breaks down when there's only a few people doing everything, right? So it's sort of a double-edged sword in that way, but absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna go to the Mentimeter piece here, but other 73 answers, but what do they say? There's answers. How do I see the answers? Oh, thank you. Okay, all right. All right, what does this mean? What am I looking at? Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. Some people with the number. Okay. Does anybody who does anybody who put anything in here want to put some voiceover on why you chose what you chose? Yeah, please. All right. So for those who you couldn't hear this, this was a pitch for system level agreements with KCTCS around transfer and a question about, and I think it is easy to say when making sense of a set of challenges to say it feels like our students aren't valued. It feels like our students aren't valued because we don't have these experiences. I think for a lot of four-year institutions that are experiencing their own pressures, there are a host of challenges, right? And so I so want to acknowledge that as well. Yeah, please, sure.
I'll sort of tag onto that, and I think it addresses the hidden prerequisites part, and
can I just add before you finish, because I want you to finish what you're saying, that is such an important point around the aligning curriculum. One of the places, sort of some of the places that we are working, we're finding people moving in the direction of erring on the side of defaulting to applicability of credits, and when credits aren't accepted, there has to be reason given. There have to be, so alignment begins with also clarifying why, right? Because if any individual decisions can be made to not accept credits and transfer without any communication about why that's the case, it's very hard to get to the bottom of the alignment challenge, right? You can have a lot of meetings without really cracking that nut. So having sort of reason giving and transparency about decisions and credit evaluation is really, really important part of the alignment conversation.
I'll put that to like a real world applicability. So, two-year college may give math credit through a non-proctored exam, whereas we see students who are given that then come to a four-year and don't succeed in the next level math because of that, right? So aligning the vision of how we're awarding those credits. The other thing I was going to say is policy, looking at that on a state level and an institutional level. So we've found that a lot of our scholarship policies and so forth don't work with transfer students who come and agree at a later date.
Yeah, yeah.
Commit at a later date than our first-year students. But then statewide, looking at the statewide funding metrics, there's not a lot that rewards transfer. So that's something that we would want to make priority on the state.
Excellent. Okay, so for those who couldn't hear, oh, yep.
Thank you. I was just going to say that it's very difficult to hear in this room, and so we missed back here almost everything you said. So thank you for restating.
Okay. And that was just the amount of time that I needed to forget everything that he said. No, I'm kidding. I've got it. The last piece was on the funding formula. Actually, there's very little in your funding formula that incentivizes transfer and good treatment of transfer students, right? And so that's one of the pieces of the puzzle that needs to be cracked. Even if this work is practice-focused, institution-focused, there has to be a connection to and real attention to the incentives that shape institutional behavior that are baked into your funding formula. The other conversation was about curricular alignment and about the communication and shared understanding about the conditions for applicability of credits and transfer. And an example was used around an unproctored exam in a course that transfers and challenges with success rates in those courses subsequently. And so having clarity around expectations related to coursework that is completed in one institution with the expectation that it is honored in another, right? What else did I miss?
There was institutional level policies around financial aid.
Oh, financial aid and scholarships. Yes. So financial aid and scholarships, institutional policies. Again, this is one of the things that is so important to really understand how institutional policies impact transfer student affordability. We know it makes perfect sense that, I don't know if it's the case here, but in most of the places that we work, lower division scholarships are sort of administered administratively in a centralized fashion. Upper division scholarships are departmental. And it makes sense intuitively that faculty would lean toward creating opportunities for resources to go to students that they had met and known for years, right, that they had been building relationships with. So there really need to be structural ways for four-year institutions to provide the kinds of scholarships that transfer students need to be on a level playing field, essentially, right? All right, what else? Yeah, please. Yeah.
If they don't see that there's a job waiting, not waiting, but
Yeah.
isn't some clarity in what those long-term goals are and what it can provide to them, they're most likely not going to engage in that
Yeah. Yeah, so this comment is about what is, beginning with the end in mind, right? That really helping students understand what is the value in the form of the payoff, right? The ROI, the return on investment for higher education, that there is a job, that there is a career trajectory for me, that doors open and that my life gets better if I, right? Absolutely. I think that communication around the labor market outcomes and value of higher education and post-secondary attainment is essential. I think it's also the case that as students encounter barriers and encounter disconnects, that really chips away at students' sense of self-efficacy. So, one of the places, and I think some of you, maybe the transfer specialists, I told you, I don't know if I told you this, but I had the opportunity to do in 2013, so quite a while ago, a decade ago, 50 focus groups across the state of Indiana with every IU regional and every Ivy Tech feeder with transfer students. And what we heard again and again, and there's no reason to do 50 focus groups unless you want every single regional institution in a state to not be able to say this isn't about us. And so to IU's credit, they wanted everybody in the mix on that. With their public institutions, they should have had their private and independent institutions in the mix in that as well. So just want to shout that out. But in those conversations, students said again and again things like, I should have known. I should have known that my credits wouldn't transfer. I should have known that it actually was a false promise that these institutions are competitors, that they're not actually here to help me start at a community college and finish a four-year. I should have known. And there were things that they would say, like, I should have known that the only place that I could get absolutely for sure reliable information, because a lot of well-meaning people gave me what turned out to be not correct information, right? The only place that I should have known that the only place I could get the right information for sure was from the chair of the department at the four-year institution I want to transfer to. And to hear a student say that, so I remember asking a few focus groups in, like, why? Why would you think that you should have known that? And these students were not saying, I'm furious with these institutions for the false promise of a pathway. They were saying, I should have known. I don't belong here. I've gotten the message one way or another my whole life that I'm not college material, and this really capped it off for me. So when we talk about return on investment for students, all of the barriers that they face along the way conspire against having a sense of that possibility at the end. You can say there's a $160,000 job waiting for you on graduation, right? But that promise even becomes a false promise if the path is one that is fraught with challenges, right? And, these were the students that were sticking around. These were not the students that had stopped out and said, I'm not, forget it, definitely not worth my time or money. Other thoughts? Yeah, please.
Another thing that kind of ties in what you just mentioned, as well as the financial piece of it, is right behind your head.
Ooh.
Transfer culture.
Ah.
Because even though that slide that you had transfer in the center, especially from the external forces of policymakers, transfer is not valued the way it should be.
Hmm.
And so that trickles over into the students, ultimately the society, developing this perception of transfer not being effective, that it's all about workforce, which workforce absolutely is important. But the transfer piece kind of gets lost in that.
Yeah.
And so working on that perception, that culture of the value of transfer.
Yeah.
And then working on the benefits of, of these specific pathways. It's all part of that puzzle.
Yeah.
I know the transfer strategy doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily have control of those external factors.
Yeah.
It's something we've got to focus on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Figure out something.
Yep. So this comment was about transfer culture, right? This comment about percentage of two-year students who transfer is lower than the national average, then the transfer culture tag on the front of that. And what does it mean to have a culture that is genuinely friendly to transfer students, values transfer, right? That centers the experience of transfer students. I think for a long time, transfer was viewed as kind of an add-on, a subpopulation, right? But it is increasingly the norm, and you would be very hard-pressed to find any group, any cohort of any type that wouldn't be significantly served by improvements in transfer culture, right? And so the culture of transfer, you know, the comment from the KCTCS system table about, you know, transfer students do better, you know, by and large, right? They do as well, if not better, than their first-time full-time freshmen, right? Like the things that are kind of baked in myths around transfer and transfer student success that conspire against that culture that we need to see is certainly part of the piece here. I will say, though, that when it comes to culture, people, it's an overwhelming concept, right? It eats strategy for lunch and organizational effectiveness for dinner and everything else for snacks, but culture is the accumulation and reproduction of your policies, practices, and mindsets every single day, right? And not you, all of us, right? So you are either challenging or reproducing a culture every time you show up at work. So it is tremendous work to be done here, but also tremendous work that is underway. What else? Other ideas that are really important for thinking about in terms of implementation, effective implementation of the transfer strategy. I want to make sure Beth Ann has a few minutes here to wrap up, but I want to hear more. And tomorrow, I don't know when the last time was you all played with the Mr. Potato Head, but it's coming back at you tomorrow. Yes, please.
These are all really large, complex, knotty, maybe just a maybe potato heady kind of complex things that we're trying to do. And so what I was thinking is that if we were able to get some wins together by identifying the statewide transfer agreements, maybe just a handful that are the most important to our state, that we could all come together and agree on because we have to.
Yep.
That might be a place to start.
That's great. Thank you. And I feel like this is a great segue to tomorrow. I see Dr. Collins nodding over here. So this idea of needing wins, of like, just let's get something, let's show ourselves some wins here and move forward. These are huge, complex problems. I think this issue of statewide transfer pathways is definitely a place to dig in, and I see a lot of feedback there. It is also the case that all of tomorrow is going to be focused on how do you take things that are big and knotty and complicated and break it down into work that allows you to really, truly accelerate progress and give yourselves, your colleagues, and your students a sense of hope and efficacy in being able to make significant progress on longstanding challenges. So thank you for the early wins comment, and for thinking about something like statewide transfer pathways in those highest impact areas. All right, ready? All right, so Dr. Collins is going to take us home, and then tomorrow it is not going to be me talking at you endlessly. I promise you, it is going to be like 10 minutes of saying things at you and then you doing stuff together. And so we're actually going to get down to some practical work together here. All right, thank you. I'll leave my computer back and get it.
Awesome. All right, if you all will join me in thanking Dr. Kadlec for that wonderful session. That's awesome.